Okay, everybody, we are going to kick off. So welcome to the Finance and Audit Committee meeting of the 25th of May. So I'll just do some housekeeping first. So this meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. For those in the chamber, just take note of the fire and emergency exit. If you need a defibrillator, it's out on the front of house, but hopefully this meeting will be calm and we won't need one of those. So, and just follow the administrator if we do need to evacuate. Remember, we're in the COVID-19 framework, so we're in an orange setting, so please take note of those precautions and social distancing. Now, we have several councillors online today. So we have, let's have a look at my list. So we have councillors Vaughan Dennison, Councillor Dingwall, Johnson, Mickelard, Mr Armstrong and Councillor Meehan are online. So we will be voting by the hands today, but for those in the chamber, please push your buttons for questions. And I will stay alert to questions from councillors online. And I think we have covered all, and just make sure that when you're presenting for those online that people know who you are if you're staff. So please announce who you are before speaking if we haven't already done so. So I think that takes care of that. We will now move to the apologies. So I have apologies from Councillor Butt, who's absent on council business, and Councillor Bowen. So I'll move the apologies and have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Naylor. So we'll just wait till we go online. Oh, we've just got a problem with the Deputy Mayor's.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair. There's an apology from the Mayor and I for early departure on council business.
Oh, okay, thank you. So there's an apology for the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor for early departure. Sorry, was that both? Both, yes. Okay, we'll add that to it. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so we'll now vote. So would you show your hands, please, if you're in favour? Yep. Anyone against? So that's carried unanimously. Right, I've had no notification of additional items. Are there any declarations of interest? I'm not aware of any. Anyone online? No, we're covered. I'm not aware of any public comment, but I'll just check. There's no public comment. And we'll now move on to confirmation of the minutes. Is there any? I'm happy to move the minutes. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Naylor. And I believe, Councillor Naylor, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And firstly, just want to say congratulations on your appointment to the Chief Financial Officer. Just one question that I raised in the quarterly report in the last meeting that I think is still yet to be answered, that I think would be relevant to have answered before going into tomorrow's deliberations, and that is the question around how the capitalised salary is tracked operationally and how the portion that relates to the undelivered capital program is treated. Is that able to be answered?
Through you, Madam Chair. In terms of the capitalised salary, so the capitalised salary, the way that works is the resourcing is provided to deliver on the capital program that we have. As we are aware, we have been under-resourced in that area, and that is part of the reason behind why we are having some issues in delivering on capital. The other aspect, of course, is where we do have vacancies in other aspects of the council, sometimes the resources are used to backfill what is what I'd call critical and necessary delivery of service levels. So there is a little bit of that can happen. If we were to, say, remove the capitalised salaries, as an example, what that means is to deliver on the capital program, the effect of that is that we would still need resource. We would probably need to use contracting resource to ensure delivery of projects. So that's the balance. If we were 100% fully resourced and we weren't delivering upon the capital program at 100% resource, then I suspect that would come down to some questions as to what's happening here when we've said that that's what's required to deliver. It's a bit of that chicken and egg situation. To deliver, we need the resources.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I'm certainly not suggesting removing it. But I understand that's good to have an understanding of what you've explained in the current situation, but my interest is more the
Has that question been answered, councillor?
I'll leave the rest till
Thank
tomorrow.
you.
I mean, just the latter part.
That's fine.
Okay.
Right, we'll move
Madam
on.
Chair, am I able to make a comment then, please?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Now?
Yes, we've moved and seconded.
Okay.
So I'll open, just one moment first. Are there any further questions? There's not, so now you can comment.
Thank you. Just to, comment on the question I've asked, I guess. I accept and understand the current situation, particularly when we've got a lot of vacancies, that perhaps it's not really a big concern if we're not delivering all of our capital program and if we are resourced in terms of that. But I do think it's something as a council that we do need to watch, because if we're funding some salaries from debt, that is because of the capital programs that need to be delivered by that, if we do get to a point where we are fully recruited to, and then we're not delivering our full capital program, we could find ourselves in the position where we're funding salaries to deliver programs that aren't being delivered. And I just think we need to be mindful of how that's tracked and just keep an eye on it going forward. I'm certainly comfortable with the current situation, and tomorrow's debate will be about adding another, portion to that. But I do think we need to have a good understanding of it and perhaps see how it's tracked. It's not something that's been visible to elected members historically, but if we're going to add to it, I think perhaps it's something that we need to monitor a little bit more closely.
Can I just make one clarification for the councillor, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
Just one clarification that might not be quite clear in my response is, when I'm talking about the capital program, I'm talking about a mix of capital new and capital renewal. So there is a portion of those capitalised staff that goes into capital renewal as well, which is through the 3-year rolling average, which is rate funded. So not all of the capitalised salaries is funded by debt. So I just wanted to make that clarification so that that's clear. But we do take on point the desire to try and look at how perhaps we can report on that better, and that's something we can continue to look at.
Okay. Thank you, Cameron. And congratulations on your new role too as CFO. Right, we'll now move on to vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Anybody against? So that is carried. Right, we will now move on to item number 6, and that's on page 11, and that is a request for financial support for the Regent Theatre Trust. And this report will be presented by Anton Carter, who's the Group Manager of Community Services, and with Anton we have the two Davids, David Walsh, the General Manager of the Regent, and David Lee, who's the Chair of the Regent Board. So it's a 3-man presentation, so I'll hand it over to you, Anton. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Atamare koutou. The memorandum before you is a request for financial support from the Regent Theatre Trust, a council-controlled organisation. The Regent currently receives an annual grant of $240,000. The financial request is to cover a forecasted shortfall of $50,000 and $30,000 towards a planned repair and maintenance. The recommendations presented are tiered from full support to partial support through to no support. If the committee was to support options 1 and 2, then the funds previously identified to this committee last month from the events and programs underspend could be utilised, of which 135 was left as a balance. I'd just like to point out that I think the request is not due to any form of mismanagement and should not be seen as a bailout, but rather their financial position is purely due to the factors out of their control. So there's just a brief summary of the paper, so I'm happy to ask questions or have the Davids speak.
Okay, before we go to questions, do the Davids wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
So we have David Lee.
David Lee as Chairman, yes. Madam Chair, councillors, staff, firstly, thank you for giving us the time this morning to speak to this. We appreciate being able to speak to you and to put our case. For many years, I and my predecessors have sat before this council and been advised by councillors and staff that our future financial security depends on how well we have built our reserves, that we need to ensure we have sufficient funds to cover unknown eventualities, and that we need to ensure we have enough reserves to cover at least perhaps the next 12 months. And I'd like to say now thank you for that advice. We did, and we have survived, just. Without our reserves, we would probably have had to shut down our business, lay off our staff, and handed our magnificent building back to your care. Please be assured, however, that we are not anywhere near having to do any of those things. But if something like lockdowns, COVID, a natural disaster, maybe monkeypox, hit us tomorrow, we could not survive for very long. You've seen the figures given in the report, and David will update you in a moment, but it's very clear we are now in a precarious position. We are lucky we have so far survived. In the last 2 years, we have endured many things. Matthew Davey and the ticket rocket debacle. We have managed our way through the loss of 2 general managers. We have negotiated COVID, then Delta, then Omicron. We have maintained and built a board filled with exceptional talent in many areas, including legal, business, accountancy, cultural awareness, youth focus, policy knowledge, experience. We have a manager with tremendous experience and local knowledge and contacts. In a nutshell, we are travelling very well. We don't want to risk all that hard work by trying to move forward with depleted reserves to back us on our journey. However, we will if we have to, and we will with strength and determination, and with an ounce of luck, we will succeed. But the decision that you have to make is, are you happy that your CCO take this risk? Or would you prefer your CCO were given a relatively small grant to ensure their journey forward was a long-term successful journey? I liken it to filling up the petrol tank before it gets empty. You may ask, what are the benefits of the city? Well, there's no doubt that when the Regent is booming, the city is booming. The retailers are happy, and the ratepayers' experience and therefore lives are enhanced. I'd like to conclude, if I may, Madam Chair, on what is perhaps a more serious note. All of us have experienced the negative effects COVID has delivered. For us, this has been exacerbated by Ticket Rocket and the manager's resignations. This has exhausted us, pushed us to the limit, worn us down, and dampened our spirit. Now, I know that any decision you make must be based on facts and figures, but I also think you as decision makers should be aware of the mental health effects the last 2 years have had on our board members and especially our staff. If I could be so bold as to say an injection of funds will go a long way to brighten our day, lift our spirits and increase our determination for moving forward. We all do this job because of the joy and the satisfaction we receive when we see our theatre humming. There's not been much humming recently, and even less joy. Open to questions, Madam Chair, but if I could ask David just to update you somewhat on some of the figures.
Yes, thank you, David. Good morning. Yes, we have survived during these last 2 years of stop, start, stop again, start again, stop once more, start once more. I know we have risen to the many challenges over these times and are still working our way forward. These times, although it's had a drain on staff, is also starting to affect our bank balances as well. Salary and wages amounting to $260,000 a year to date have been supplemented by the government wage subsidy of $69,500 and $31,000 by way of government resurgent payment, thus making a total amount received from the government of approximately $100,000. We acknowledge the Palmerston North City Council's grant year to date of $200,000. Our expenditure is about 10% below budget year to date. Our auditorium hire, and that's obviously when we rent out the theatre for events, is 77% down on budget. Normally the auditorium income year to date in 2019 was sitting at about $185,000. 2020, when COVID first started coming in, it dropped to $150,000. Last year we got to $145,000. This year we're sitting at $44,000. So all venues have struggled during these COVID times. We have started today on our road to recovery with having our first function in 6 months. It's exciting. The theatre's humming this morning. But we have to remember that COVID is still in the community. COVID will affect our staff at times. It will affect the patrons that come to the theatre. But it also will affect some of the acts. And once the COVID hits the main act or performance, it means the show will be cancelled and delayed. And again, that affects our finances. So we understand we're not expecting a quick fix. And our return to normal, whatever that may be, will involve us to continually work hard in attracting a variety of events. And just a little bit of good news, in the last 2 days I have booked 4 international acts at the theatre, 1 from Hawaii, 1 from London and 2 from Australia. So there is interest out there, but we can't guarantee they're going to get here because of COVID. And we will continue, obviously, to have tight control on expenditure. As David said, he's happy to take questions.
Thank you, David.
Possibly pass to you.
Right, first up for questions, I have the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, both David and Anton. I just have a question around the financials. So, understanding that this would have been pulled together at least some weeks ago, I just wondered whether there was any change on the operating deficit forecast for the year.
Currently, as at the end of April, our operating deficit was $74,000, and I did forecast a operating deficit for the year of about 88,000, and we're still, if I want to say, on track to achieve that, but it's not something that I want to achieve, obviously.
Okay, and so in terms of the, so originally the deficit being 88K and the request for 80,000, is there still, in your view, is it still a request for 80,000 or would it be a request for 74,000?
74,000 is only up to the end of April, and we're now at the end of May, and we've had one event, which is on today. So our request for 80,000
Would still stand?
would still stand.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess a second question would be, in terms of the operating of the theatre, obviously Friends of the Region is quite an integral part, and I wondered how you kind of forecasted that participation still continuing within the environment we're working in, whether you feel like there would be any disruption to support from Friends of the Region, considering that a lot of them are older people.
The Friends of the Region are very similar to us because they've suffered a loss as well because their income has stopped over these past 6 months. Hence, you can see some of our assets that I've mentioned in here, replacements, which we would have gone to them for funding, has been put on delay. And until they build their funds back up again, we won't be approaching them till possibly early next year sometime.
Okay, so that's another income source that will be difficult to obtain.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, David and Anton. So I understand the loss of income that you've had through circumstances outside your control. What ability have you had to control your costs? How much flexibility do you have to reduce costs, or are a lot of your costs inevitable if the theatre remains open?
I think I can answer that in that we have reduced our staff, and that's about the only area we can reduce. Obviously, things like cleaning are cut back, but we have to maintain the staff that we have maintained. We have to maintain that because somebody might want to hire the theatre tomorrow, and we have to be able to be ready to service that hireage. So to answer your question, we have looked at everything and done as much as we think is possible to keep our costs down to the lowest we can. But our main cost is the wages, and we've done a little bit there, but still, yeah, electricity, it's, it's still a cost. All of those other standing costs really don't change much.
Yeah, that's what I suspected. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You hinted that the future looks quite good with your bookings, etc. With the NZSO, how are the bookings going for that?
Disappointing at this stage. We're finding that people booking tickets are just holding back because they don't want to buy their tickets too early in case the show gets transferred to another date or gets cancelled, and they're just leaving it to the last minute. So we are, the NZSO is not till the 17th and 18th of June, yep. So there's still a little bit of time and we've got some work to do, but currently they could be better.
Because that's one of your big ones normally, isn't it? Yes,
the NZSO and the Royal New Zealand Ballet are usually very well attended.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Anton and David. My question's around yeah, I guess the reason for you being here, and that you know, council's clearly in a position of surplus. If council were not in a position of surplus, would you still be coming with this request?
The fact that the council is in surplus is pure coincidence. It may be good luck on our part, who knows? But it's certainly not the reason we're here. I think, look, this is your CCO, this is your building, this is your city. Who else can we go to? If we can't protect our future through our involvement with the City Council, what can we do?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for coming in to see us today. Look, just really, I just want to get some clarity just around the forecast deficit. And you're saying that it's now likely to be more than $70,000, but in a letter that was written, I think on the 12th of May, the split for the recommendation was $30,000 for planned repairs and $50,000 towards the forecast deficit. So I guess as we travel forward, is it likely that we're going to, there might be a subsequent request to support the region?
No, the $80,000, which was made up of 30 and 50. 50 was a contribution back for the operational deficit, and we asked for 30,000 towards the cost of some of our asset renewals programs, like the curtains. The theatre curtains are 25, 30 years old. Some of them came from the Opera House and they got holes in them, etc. And we were going to replace those this year with the contribution from the Friends, but that's just on hold at this stage. So we've put in our programs just to let you know that a contribution towards that would be appreciated.
So the intention is that if the $80,000 was approved today, then $30,000 would be put towards those those repairs and maintenance.
Yes, they would. Yes.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, just one last question, just in terms of future events, and you talked about, I guess, the uncertainty of perhaps future variants of COVID and things like that. But once you've actually got events booked, what protection is there in terms of, like if there is a pullout, is there any protection around perhaps insurance or anything else like that? So what I'm saying is there a safety net on that?
There is a safety net to the extent that a promoter can claim insurance through the government for a loss of event, and if he has paid us some funds, we can claim that he can put that on his claim. Like if he pays a deposit of $500, we would retain that $500 and he can claim that back. But our loss of income, if we were supposed to get $5,000 from the event, we couldn't claim that, so we would miss out on that.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Anton and David. Just one little question around the R&M. There is nothing in there that could be deferred. It's all maintenance that has to happen today?
All maintenance can be deferred. It just weighs just that little bit more. The staging units, they lasted now for 25 years. I mean, another 12 months, they'll still be there. But yes, but we had programmed these in, and this is in my report, and this is why we put it in.
Yep. Okay. Second question is around the 50,000. Some in the community may ask why we'd not be asking you to go back into your reserves for that 50,000. It's just a question that we could be asked ourselves. So I just want to get that clarified of why you would not dip into your reserves for that 50,000.
We're grateful that we've had reserves, and that's why we're still operating. If something happened tomorrow, we'd be out the door. And so the key to this application, I guess, is that we are trying to future-proof. If something went wrong, we would need those reserves. So we are asking for reserves, for money to be put into reserves, but for very good reasons, we believe. It's about what are we going to do tomorrow if what's it called, monkey flu or whatever it is, comes along and stops us from operating. We want to be able to survive.
Okay.
And we couldn't we couldn't for long on our current reserves.
Okay. Thanks for that answer. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question is similar to Councillor Harper, really. Just the reserves that are outlined, a bit over 300,000, is there any reason why you wouldn't use that for your repairs and maintenance at the moment?
The only reason that we wouldn't use that is that we're frightened about tomorrow. So yes, it could be used, but all it will do is make our reserves lower.
Okay.
And we know that we need at least that amount to be able to survive a 3 or 4 month disaster. And that disaster could be anything, an earthquake or whatever.
And just my second question is around the COVID relief fund that's been made available by council to the community. Are you aware of the COVID relief fund, and have you made an application to it?
Yeah, we are aware of it, but we haven't applied. We thought that non-profit groups like Operatic and people like that should be using that money. You're talking about the council COVID relief fund?
Yes,
Yeah. Yep.
yes.
No, we haven't applied.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the team for the paper and presentation. I understand the need for resilience and for certainty, but my question really is, rather than putting the cash in to sit there for a rainy day, would your needs around certainty of future funding be satisfied if there was a commitment to provide a loan in the event of an emergency? Would that satisfy the requirement so that you could go forward knowing that in the worst case, the event, if you're faced with a difficult situation, another lockdown, whatever, that you do have the ability to call on a committed funding line to see you through those times?
The answer to that is yes. However, it wouldn't be desirable. It doesn't make it as clean and as simple as having our own reserves there the minute we need them. To be fair, we hadn't thought of asking for a loan. I guess, you know, it could be seen that we are one organisation, aren't we? We are simply an arm of council.
If it was a committed funding facility available at your discretion to draw down in an emergency, would that satisfy your requirements?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
If it was a committed funding line available for drawdown at your discretion, would that be simple and clean enough?
Yes. We would have no objection to that. If you didn't want to give us the cash, we'd be happy with the credit.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Just a thought. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillors, are there any more questions? Councillor Dingwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, David and Anton, for this report. I just wanted to get some clarity. So if you didn't get the 80K today, would that mean that your 88K end of year projected deficit would come out of your reserves?
Correct.
Right. And your current reserves is at 300K?
Give or take.
Approximately. Okay. And how much have you needed to dip into your reserves so far over the last 2 years?
About 100 and, give or take 100K.
Excellent. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Can I just ask the CFO a question? If we approve the money in this financial year, because we've got our deficit and everything, that just goes into the bank account of the surplus, and it just goes into the bank account of the Regent. But if we hold it over as a credit for them in the future, that could hit, say, August into the next financial year. So we can't defer money into another financial year because it's operational. Is that correct? Is that my understanding?
Yes, to a degree. Now, it depends on what you do decide. So for example, if this was a credit facility to them, that would sit more as a asset on our books as a basically a community loan that we've given out. So it won't come out of the operating because there'll be expectation that would be repaid to us.
That's on a loan. I'm talking about a grant.
Yeah. So if it was a grant, the cleanest way for us to deal with a grant at the moment would be to deal with it in this financial year. Otherwise, we would need to make some provision for it in the annual budget deliberations for next year.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Okay, I'll just check there's no further questions. There's none. So I have a recommendation from Councillor Naylor, and I'm happy to second it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. You may step down. So I have a recommendation, and I'm happy to second it, so that the committee recommends that that Council approves financial support of $50,000 to the Regent Theatre Trust Board in the 2021-22 financial year, and that's moved by Councillor Naylor and myself, seconder, and Councillor Naylor, I'll let you speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the Regent's request and their transparency in the situation that they're in. David Lee made the comment, all of us have experienced the negative effects of COVID, and that's a very true statement. I think the negative effects of COVID need to be considered in a broad sense across our community, and I think as council, when it's appropriate to step in and help, we need to do that in the context of the fact that the community is still paying for that. So that is why my comfort level for how we should help the region out in this way isn't for the full amount that's been requested, but certainly will go a long way in offsetting this year's deficit. I'm really hopeful that we are coming around the corner, that we are around the corner, and I mean the National Young Leaders Day being in there today is great, and I'm hopeful that the Regent will return to business as usual, despite the challenges of COVID, and that going ahead they will be able to financially be sustainable. I think reserves are made for such a time as this. So from my perspective, I don't see any reason why the repairs and maintenance that is required in the Regent cannot be paid for out of the reserves. There is a comfortable reserves there, and I, acknowledge the good running of the Regent in creating that reserve, and that's obviously for the Regent to determine what things are a priority. But at this stage, this council is never going to let the Regent go, fall over. We've got an ongoing relationship with the Regent. If down the track it becomes apparent that things are not going well, we will be having ongoing conversations. This is not the end of the story. But I also just think we need to be mindful what precedent we're setting for other organisations at this time where COVID has, many people have experienced the negative effects of COVID.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've noticed that if this fails, I will move A, that will support for the 80,000. And the reason I do this is that we as a council put $100,000, an extra $100,000 in for the community for COVID because of the dire straits that many of our community groups are in and how COVID has affected them. We've heard from the management team today that even though they've got good programs coming up, sales are still not coming in. There is no doubt the community is still very COVID affected and a lot of people aren't going out and some of them will not certainly go to the organisation like the region. I feel that we as a council for years have supported the region and we've put large amounts of money into the region and it is the gem of our city. We call it the gem and we bandy it around everywhere, even mention it when we're employing people overseas. And it's our responsibility to see that the region stays up to standard and not that maintenance is not deferred and put aside. So I believe that we need to support the region and we'll support the region for the 80,000. So I will not vote for the 50 and I will move the 80 if it fails. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll just signal that I'm happy to second Councillor Finlay's alternative motion, should this one fail. I absolutely believe that we should be providing the 80,000 to the Regent Theatre Trust Board as requested. And I'll just try and outline some of my reasons. The first one is that the Regent Theatre is effectively an arm of council. It's a council-controlled organisation. And I think Councillor Jeffries was on council at the time. We worked very, very hard in previous years to get the Regent Theatre up and running, to save the Regent. There was the big campaign and to make it a success. And the Regent Theatre, along with every other performing arts organisation in the country, has just been hit with the most unfortunate set of circumstances regarding the pandemic, through no fault of their own. And on top of that, the Regent has got the extra complication of the Ticket Rocket episode. And I do think that, it's not been easy for them to come to council and ask for more funding. They've got limited ability to reduce their costs any further. And we as council, I think, would be remiss to put them in a situation where they're one disaster away from closure. And I remind councillors that the airport were in a similar situation a couple of years ago, coming to us to request that they no longer pay a dividend into council. And, the dividend varied from year to year, but it was at least $500,000, if not $600,000. And we as a council agreed that they wouldn't have to pay that dividend. And that was orders of magnitude more than the 80,000 that the Regent are asking for. The other thing I think we should remember is that the Regent could have put multiple applications into the COVID Relief Fund, but they chose not to because they recognised that there would be other not-for-profit, smaller community organisations that needed that money. And they struggled on. But now they're in a situation where they need a handout. And I think that we should be looking to save further requests coming to us. The 50,000 is all very well, but if it's not sufficient, then they're going to have to come back again. And really, to me, this is about risk. It's about risk to the region. It's about how much risk we're prepared to accept. And I do strongly believe that we should be funding them the 80,000. And so I'm going to vote against the 50, not because I don't want them to have the 50, but in the hope that it fails so that we can put up the 80,000. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like most of our colleagues, I believe I was jumping in the queue to give a notice of motion to move 1A. So I'm glad that Councillor Finlay has and will absolutely support that. So I'm going to vote against the recommendation for 50K. I don't believe that that is going far enough. There's a couple of reasons, and I guess one of them is that I believe that your reserves are your emergency fund, and so they're not actually there for your normal maintenance cycle. And we've heard an example of curtains that have been in the region for 25 years and have holes in them, and are due for the normal renewal cycle. I wasn't aware curtains lasted 25 years, but that's good to know. It's not a reason to dip into your emergency fund to replace your curtains. That's normal ongoing maintenance, and so that should come out of, that should certainly not come out of a reserves fund. The region has been through many disruptions. Councillor Johnson outlined some of those, and it's not just COVID. COVID has disrupted everybody, but there are more factors that have disrupted the region. I don't want this this financial difficulty to hang over the relationship that we have with the region. We have regular reporting, we have an ongoing relationship, we have the region in here or online on a regular basis, and I don't want this to be a sticking point in terms of something that is continually either sitting on the books as a financial struggle or something that needs to be addressed when, quite frankly, the region doesn't have any other avenue at the moment to address the shortfall. I guess the thing that it comes down to for me is that we don't need another Save the Regent campaign. This is a waving the flag before we get to the crisis situation. And so the Regent have come to us. We are in a position right now where we can support them. We should support them. And so I just think it makes sense to provide the $80,000 financial relief and continue on and hope COVID goes away. So I'll be voting against the recommendation that we have, waiting for the 1A recommendation to come up.
Thank you. Okay, councillors, we've had 3 people against the motion. Is there anybody else for it that wishes to speak? I've got a few in the queue, but I'm suspecting that they're all going to be. So there's no one for, that's fine. So I will now go back to Councillor Naylor, your right of reply.
Thank you. I just a couple of points. I think, reserves are an emergency fund that, they're made for a time such as this. And I think when there's 310,000 in reserves, we are far from a Save the Regent campaign. I think 50,000 is a generous way to address the situation that's been confronted with us. And I think it's also prudent. In our papers, the risk under option 1 is that it may contribute to future expectations from council-controlled organisations that council will bail them out when they get into financial trouble. And whilst we do want to help our CCOs when it's needed, we also need to take a measured approach to that and allow them to use their reserves, and that will encourage ongoing sustainability into the future. So I think this is the prudent decision.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, just a point of order, could because we're not allowed to speak, could I call for a division on this one, please?
Yep, certainly. Okay, we will now move to a division. So thank you, Sarah.
All right. Councillor Naylor. Councillor Hancock.
Against.
Councillor Meehan. He can't hear us. Sorry. One moment. Councillor Meehan.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear you, Billy.
I'm on.
Oh. Billy said 4. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, you can. Thank you. Councillor Johnson?
Against.
Councillor Dingwall?
Against.
Councillor Harpeter?
Against.
Councillor Dennison?
Against.
Councillor Finlay? Councillor Petrinas?
Against.
Against.
Councillor Barrett?
Against.
Deputy Mayor Rutherford?
Against.
Mayor Smith?
Against.
Councillor Beattie?
For.
Councillor Mickelard.
Against.
And I didn't hear Mr. Is Mr. Armstrong called?
Apologies. Mr. Armstrong.
I'll abstain.
That motion is definitely lost. I'll get that. So that motion is lost. There was 11 against and 3 for and 1 abstention. So we'll move on to the next recommendation, which we'll have on the screen in one moment. And that recommendation is Council approves financial support of $80,000 to the Regent Theatre Trust Board in the 2021-22 financial year, and that is moved by Councillor Finlay and Councillor Johnson, seconded. So Councillor Finlay, I'll pass it off over to you.
I think enough has been said, and I think the councillors made very clear how they think about the region.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just apologies for lateness. I was just trying to save another organisation, the Capital Connection train, but with media. But look, so apologies for lateness. Look, I'm going to support Councillor Finlay and Councillor Johnson's motion. The Chair and the Manager have only come to us because they absolutely need our support. We've been in regular contact for the last couple of years, and I think there was the word mentioned, Save the Regent campaign again. They've come to us because they want to avoid any of that. Councillors will be aware that we haven't had to bail out any other CCOs, facilities or theatres. We've been fortunate. Our colleagues in other cities, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Hamilton, and others have had to do that to the tune of many millions. So we've been quite fortunate. Councillor Johnson mentioned the airport. I think that's slightly different, but her point was this is something that we should be doing. And if we don't, we will be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. The reserves have been built up over many decades, and some of you that have been a bit longer than me here will realise it's been blood, sweat and tears, literally, to get those reserves. And they shouldn't be used for R&M. I think we do need to support the Regent. It's one of our gems. This is effectively an arm of council. So they've come to us with probably a heavy heart to do this, because they're an organisation which looks after itself really, really well, promotes our city exceptionally well. It's one of New Zealand's top performing arts centres and arguably regional New Zealand's top theatre. We absolutely need to support it. So I'm hoping this is going to be unanimous. Thank you.
Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very similar to the Mayor, I am quite happy to support the 80K for the Regent, mainly because when COVID first hit, I remember sitting around this table and expecting when they were coming to speak to us the first time after we'd been through lockdown, we'd been speaking with quite a few of our fellow colleagues and fully expected them to be coming to us asking for support. We knew how much the art sector had been, I guess, devastated by COVID and all of the events that got cancelled. And we've been expecting them to come to us saying that they needed support for 2 years now. So they've done an incredible job keeping that place running for the last 2 years. And I just wanted to say how I think that they've just done an amazing job, and we should be saying thank you to them for all the work that they've been doing over the last 2 years in such trying circumstances. They've already dipped into a quarter of their reserve. If we let this carry on, it'll be half of their reserves. And those reserves is actually usually what they would get in income in a year. And we already know that in this last 6 months, they've barely had any of it. So it's vital that we support this this motion, and I just wanted to just say a massive thanks to the Regent for the work they've done over the last 2 years.
Councillor Mickelard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Without wasting too much of our time, I just want to agree with the comments made by Councillor Johnson and the Mayor as well. Just want to say that, I support this recommendation in full, and I think this will go a long way in contributing to our cultural, social, and economic the economic well-being of our city, because this also supports and contributes to goal 2 of our strategic vision, a strategic vision of a creative and exciting city. So I'm happy to support this, and we all know that supporting our arts and cultural institution goes a long way in helping our city thrive, and supporting our cultural precincts or CCOs to deliver on some of these goals that we set for ourselves. So I'm happy to support this recommendation.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks for letting me speak. Just briefly, I just wanted to say fully support this, and the Regent has been affected by the numbers, and it's a numbers game, and because they couldn't have, because of the mandates, couldn't have the number of people in the venue, that's why they've been restricted for their financials because of the numbers. So it's really, it is about that, and I do really fully support that, because they really need to improve their bottom line now that they can open their doors up. So really support this and really want them to succeed, because it does, once they succeed, everybody in the city succeeds. So we can all see that going forward. So really, I hope this gets through unanimously. Thank you.
Now, I've got no one else in the queue. Is there anyone I've missed or anybody online before I close off? Councillor Finlay, do you require? Okay, thank you. So we'll now go to vote. I'm assuming we can just do that by the hands. No one? Okay, we'll just go by the hands. So all those in favour? And that is unanimous. Right, well now, so thank you to the Regent for coming in. We will now move on to item number 7, which is on page 19. And we have the Health and Safety and Wellbeing Report from January to March 22, and that will be presented by Ellen Downs, Safety and Health Manager, and Wayne Wilson, who is online as our Acting Chief People and Performance Officer. So, Ellen, I'll pass it to you, and Wayne, if you've got anything to, you just wave your hand vigorously and I'll pick it up if you want to. It's a little bit difficult when you've got a presenter online and in the chamber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take the report as read, but before we start, I'd just like to highlight that a request that was made at the last committee meeting regarding a COVID update has been included in the report under Section J. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, are there any questions, councillors? First up, Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thanks for the report. Just 2 questions. The first one's around the vacancies. What is our current vacancies?
Through you, Madam Chair, if that's okay. The last one was 126. So it's reduced since, it's been reducing.
Okay, that's good to hear. And just looking at the turnover on page 26, obviously it's just coming down ever so slightly from what it was, but still is high. Do we do exit interviews with those who leave the organisation?
Yeah, again, through you, Madam Chair, Wayne Wilson. Yes, we offer exit surveys to both the employee who leaves and the manager. The the take-up of that has decreased, and we're looking at doing that a different way. It's around 50, a little bit under 50% of staff complete those.
And is that just a written survey as opposed to an interview?
It's an online survey which is administered by Vitae for us, and we get the result. We get the information back. As part of that, they're offered a opportunity to have an interview with an HR staff member. That is taken up sometimes, but it's not a regular sort of occurrence.
Okay, and just one further question. In terms of the themes that arise in that feedback, is there a summary of that could be provided to elected members?
There is a summary. I'm not sure. Yeah, there is. I suppose it could be. It could be provided. I'm just not sure. It's more of an operational sort of thing, but it could be.
Okay, I'll leave the rest for comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Wayne and Alan. My question is around the short paragraph in section J around COVID-19, which talks about staff absence and how it's affected service provision, but is silent on mitigations that we have in place to protect staff from contracting COVID-19 in the workplace. Are you able to tell us what mitigations are in place for staff?
Through you again, Madam Chair, Wayne Wilson. I think there was an email went out last week covering off some of these issues. We're doing the following the advice from the Ministry of Health under the orange settings, so we have relaxed a lot of our things. Parts of the building are still closed off to the members of the public, although we have relaxed some of the meeting things. We're still doing all of the hygiene type activities and following those sorts of things.
Wayne, excuse me, Wayne. Got Jason who will help on.
Oh, Jason's here.
Yes,
oh,
he's in the chamber. So Jason McDowell. Sorry, I'm not. You're...
Madam Chair, sorry. Could I just add that I'm asking these questions in public. I know that some of the answers have been given to me in an email, but I wanted to ask the questions publicly. So if that's causing confusion, then I'm just clarifying that.
No, that's okay. It's fine. It's just that we've got people online and in the chamber, so it's a case of who's asking. So, Jason, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So Council has, from when COVID first initially started and when we returned staff back to the building, have been following public health advice, including social distancing as required. So as the pandemic has progressed and we've moved into the traffic light setting, we've analysed the advice that's been given from the Ministry of Health, including the local government agency, or the group of local government CEs that have provided guidance to the organisation, and we've been following those recommendations that they have put in place. So as the government have changed the traffic light setting from red down to orange, we have relaxed some of the settings that have taken place. So what that was is some of our meeting rooms were restricted to a certain number of people. Those things have been removed, including mask wearing throughout the building. So that is still a staff optional choice, and that's personal choice to staff members. If they would like to wear their masks, they can certainly do that throughout the building and in meetings. It is required to be worn in public places, such as our front of house, our public facilities, the library, Wild Base, for example. So social distancing is obviously part of it as well. That is still taking on, and you can see there's a significant behaviour change from not only our staff but all members of the public, where they're still completing social distancing, cautious around who they are around, including limiting who's in the number of people in a lift, for example, versus what you would deem totally appropriate in 2019.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me what measures have been taken to either monitor ventilation or improve ventilation in the workplace?
I might pass that on to Bryce, who's in the room as well, Councillor.
Thank you, Bryce. You may answer that one.
Bryce Hosking, Group Manager Property. Improvements to the air conditioning, there hasn't been a heck of a lot that was actually required, so we were actually compliant with what was required. Our existing air conditioning system in this building currently has a number of measures around filtering. It separates the different floors so air is not reticulating and is automatically bringing in fresh air all the time, which was a key component of that. So we did a pretty thorough assessment of the guidelines from the Ministry of Health, and it aligned fully to those.
Thank you.
Thank you. So can you give us an assurance that you feel that we're doing everything we can in terms of mitigating risk to staff from contracting COVID-19 in the workplace?
The Chief Executive will answer that for you.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, look, it's one of the things that we have discussed about, you know, how much further can you go, and I think there's always some more things you could do. You know, there's always something. The question is how far is it prudent and reasonable to go in taking steps to protect everyone. And obviously it's something we're very mindful about. We want our people in the buildings to feel comfortable about working here, about feeling safe and not at risk. So look, taking all that into account, we have concluded that we think what we're doing at the moment is reasonable given all the circumstances in terms of protecting people.
Okay, thank you. And thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, team, for this report. My questions are around the graph, the wellness graph on page 25. And when I look at the graph with the sick leave days, it does look like it's sort of trending downwards. But I guess my question is, does this include people who are taking sick leave because of COVID? And how does that compare to pre-COVID times?
Through you, Madam Chair, Wayne Wilson again. It does include those who are sick with COVID, but not those who are isolating due to COVID, but are not actually unwell. So a lot of those people are working from home. So although you may see a number of people away related to COVID, not all of them are taking sick leave. So, and if you, we did have we have had some months where there's been high amounts of sick leave being taken, but on average it is a little bit lower.
Okay, and so how does that compare with the previous, before COVID times?
Oh, yeah, that's, sorry, Wayne Wilson again. It is a little bit lower than it was pre-COVID, which, yeah, because when we, when people were when we were in lockdowns and things like that, there weren't people taking sick leave. And so on an annual basis, it sort of dropped during those periods. But I would expect it will return towards normal in the near future.
And I guess my final question around that is, are we confident that when people are sick, they are actually, you know, being sick and going home and taking sick leave and looking after themselves, as opposed to, I guess, battling on and working through, given the numbers that we've got here?
Wayne Wilson again. We've been very very strongly advising people that if they're unwell, they are unwell and they should not be working. One of the things that I don't think anyone knows yet is what's causing the long COVID, but we do have concerns that people who are not getting the proper rest and recuperation their illnesses can last longer than what they normally would. So we have been advising, and all managers and the chief executive in particular have been advising people, make sure you take the time to recuperate fully.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've got 3 questions. One is regarding training on page 24. It was about the decrease in training over the last 12 months. Just wanted to talk about online training. Was there an uptake in online training during that COVID period, or was that still a decrease in training overall?
The training provided here predominantly is operational training, so if there's a corporate training, it's not included in it. There is a move towards doing health and safety training online for officers, which will be starting shortly. But from the perspective of online versus operational, it's not included.
Okay, thank you. My second question's on the top of page 27, when it talks about turnover. On that chart, it's got 4 people have been exited. I just want to know if we could just talk about that. Maybe it's a question for the Chief Executive. In the March period. Top of page 27.
Through you, Madam Chair, Wayne Wilson again.
Hang on a moment, Wayne. Hang on a moment, Wayne. The Chief Executive is just... No, he's not. He's passed it back to you. Sorry.
Sorry, I just thought I'd add something, and then the Chief Executive may wish to comment after. The employee initiated takes into account all of those retirements and resignations, basically. The other covers, as we've discussed in the past, it could be reasons of illness or abandonment of employment, we put it. So there's other reasons. It's not only just those who have exited. It does also include those who have been dismissed. So they're the sort of categories that go into the other.
I was just trying to be clear. There is the people that have been dismissed in that category there?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And my and my third question is around J, just following up on what Councillor Johnson was going down that track, under the COVID paragraph, which I do appreciate. I just wanted to clarify what other services during that COVID period were stopped. We know the glass service was stopped. Was there any other services that were disrupted because of COVID?
Who would like to answer that one? The short straw has gone to Bryce.
Bryce Hosking, Acting Chief Infrastructure Officer. So I'll put that hat on. So yes, glass was suspended, as you've rightfully said. Outside of that, I'm not aware of any other services that were suspended. There were a number of services that were impacted through staff being away, but actually being suspended, I'm not aware of any, unless the Chief
we now have the Acting CE.
Thank you. Yeah, look, we had a lot completely suspended, but there were a number that were impacted. So, and most of that came with reduced hours of opening hours. Like as an example, the library, we stopped things like the bus was actually stopped. So I suppose that was a suspended service for a while. So a number of those, they're sort of back to normal now. But yeah, look, we also had at times, like, for instance, Wild Base was closed for a while for various reasons, but sometimes that was also relating to staff-related issues. They got really low at some points where they couldn't.
So just to follow up on that, did we get a level of complaints because our services weren't operating?
Yep. Have we had a letter of complaint?
Level of complaints because our services weren't operating, and did we communicate that? I mean, we've talked about glass, so we don't want
Yeah,
to
look,
talk
I
about...
don't, not really, yeah, so there's a bit in relation to glass, I'm aware of that, but I think on the whole, you know, residents have been really understanding about the fact that there has been impacts and what have you. So what we have done is that the comms team have been awesome, of course, in terms of, you know, as those things have come along, we've done a really good job in terms of communicating them and explaining the reasons why, and then giving people updates. And I think that's probably helped to mitigate some of the complaints that we might otherwise have got.
Thank you for that response.
Okay, Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My area of interest was the same as Councillor Naylor, which was really around the exits and the exit interviews or survey data. So really it's just a matter of just sort of, I guess, trying to get some absolute clarity around this. Is it possible that we could actually anonymise the data from those exit surveys and notate any red flags that would support elected members in terms of future decisions?
Through you, Madam Chair, Wayne Wilson. Yes, we can do that. I think we'll be able to provide a table that gives you the main reason why people have elected to move on.
Yep, thank you. And I suppose just...
Sorry, we have the acting CE.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I just note that I think there's something that we could do. The thing I would note is that I don't know if it would give us a very complete or accurate picture necessarily. It's often we can't get people to do exit surveys. You know, we love to do them because they provide really, really useful data. And then, but it can often provide you know, quite an individual response. So often the ones that I look at, they're relating to that individual's response. Now, when you aggregate them up, of course, it does tell you a picture. So I suppose all I'm saying is that, yes, you can do it, and it's something that we do because that's why we do exit surveys. I think you've got to always take them with some measure of caution, I guess, in terms of drawing too many conclusions.
Yeah, thank you. And that was kind of answered the next question, which I was going to actually put forward, was really... so what would be a reasonable way to actually bring this into this report? Would it be best to annualise that so we can actually aggregate it to, I suppose, identify themes?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's probably right. I think we would want to, you know, aggregate it as much as possible and, you know, mention the sort of themes that are coming out. Now, it's the sort of things that we certainly use at the moment. So, as you know, attraction and retention is something that's a massive focus for us in terms of trying to make sure we've got the capability. So this is where we get some of those things. We're getting really good information about things like how many people are leaving for pay, so that's where it can be particularly useful, and, you know, trying to actually identify through them as well, if you can, is just how much of a pay increase they're going. Sometimes they're a bit, again, that's sort of slightly anecdotal and there's no particular proof involved, but it certainly helps. But I think probably just reporting on the trend data of what we're seeing and the issues would be the best.
Okay, so really just to tidy this up, does that require a recommendation to come from elected members for that to occur, perhaps an annual update?
No, I don't think so. I think Wayne will take the action to start building that in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
So that will come through our existing reports.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Mr Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ellen and Wayne. Couple on this. First one's from page 31. Probably actually more of a property question. That Roslyn Library where the roof fell in or leaked or did whatever it did, we don't own that building, do we? No. And it was the landlord's responsibility, and they fixed it properly?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, that's good. It's just we've had issues with other buildings that haven't been fixed properly before. That's the reason for my question. Page 33, and probably to you, Alan, around that part of that training matrix. Is civil defence or emergency management training part of that? Because I don't see it anywhere. And it was something that I have discussed with management that as I sit on that regional committee for the city, I just note where our numbers are quite low for the size of our city.
It hasn't been, so it could be included.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a blind spot for us. And if we could go one further and look at training more controllers, and they are specifically named in the Act. So at the moment, I think we're a bit vulnerable there. So that could be possibly something that's done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ellen. Let you finish scribbling that note before getting to the question. Firstly, just had a question around the near misses, incidents, hazards table, and seeing that we don't have hazards data as identified by contractors. Is that a gap for us in identifying hazards, given that contractors are often on the ground and probably seeing some of the physical risks, et cetera, that might be there?
Yes, the answer is yes. We haven't been capturing that data. It's one of the areas we're aware of. Currently, there's quite a bit of conversation going through about how we can actually do that. But point taken.
Could you give us a sense of when we might expect to see that being integrated into our system?
We could provide an update in the next meeting, basically explaining where we're at, because we're working through this with infrastructure at the moment.
Alan, sorry to interrupt, but Bryce will help you with that question.
Okay.
Bryce Hosking, Acting Chief Infrastructure Officer. So yes, that data from contractors is not included in those numbers. However, I can give assurance that through our 3910 contracts and the contracts we have with our contractors, that they are providing reports on incidents and hazards, and that forms a key part of all of that work in contracts that we have with them. It's just not included in that data.
Thank you. If I can follow up around the scope of contractors that are included in that reference that you just made, Bryce?
Well, we're with a lot of our maintenance side of things with externals. Health and safety forms a key part of all of those engagements with them on a regular, ongoing basis. When it comes to the larger type projects, building Papiaoia Place, for instance, to use an example, a key part of that contract is an expectation around hazard reporting, any kind of incidents, near misses, and we get that data regularly through the contractor to project management, project manager relationship.
Thank you. So then by way of specific example, for instance, building cleaners would be included or not?
So yes, they are. So cleaners, we have our internal workforce, so they are included in those figures that you see. For our external contract, or at a more corporate level, they also provide data separately from that, that the property division collates and acts and investigates accordingly.
Great, thank you. Second question that I had was around the people survey. And the data from that over the last couple of years. That's page 25. So just to be reminded there, what's the scale on that, and what are we actually seeing there?
The scale on this one is total is 5. So the figures you're seeing there, for example, safe and physical harm 2020, 4.23 is out of 5.
With 5 being good and 1 being
bad.
Right. Thank you. A little bit along the lines of what Councillor Hancock was asking in terms of exit interviews. Would it be possible to get anonymized a bit more information here to understand the variance around that average? And to understand any themes or issues that might be being identified, either around the physical harm side of that or around the bullying, racism, and harassment side of that?
Who would like to answer that? Thank you.
I think that's sort of within what we've said we would do. So we'll provide, like I said, trend data, and if those sort of issues come up, then, then they'd be included.
Thanks. So that would be, what we would see then will be drawing both on exit interview information sources as well as people interview information resources.
So say that again. So exit interviews, yes.
And the people survey information source?
Oh, I'm not sure. Wayne, do you want to comment?
Sorry, yeah, I'm just trying to recall the actual information that was gathered with those surveys, but I think it was just a straight out mark this a 1 to 5, and I'm not sure that actual survey had any comments in it. But I'll go back and check on that and see what we can report in the next quarter.
Thank you. My final question really is around, I suppose, having a very high level of clarity for council and the community around this, and I greatly appreciate the undertaking by the acting chief people officer and the acting chief executive. Given that we have a range of people in acting roles and that there could be some change perhaps in some of those areas over time, would we as council be advised to actually put in place a recommendation that gives us all clarity and gives any future incumbents in roles clarity about council's expectation? Don't know if anybody in staff wants to comment around that.
Yeah, and I'll comment. It's Wayne Wilson again. No, we've over time in this health and safety area, we've listened to each suggestion that's been made, and we've acted upon it. And you've clarified, and as we've been able to give you data, and we've aimed to improve on it each time you've clarified. So it's your prerogative to move something, but we will be acting on the suggestions you've made today.
Great, thank you for that answer, Wayne.
And that was your final question?
I think I'm clear, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, apologies, Madam Chair, for coming back into the queue. I just forgot to ask one question. It's just a matter of clarity. On page 30, there was a serious incident there involving an attack on a member of staff over a pool fence query. Can I just have that confirmed that we actually did report that to the police? It's just not indicated in the report, that's all.
So what number is it?
Page 30, it's item 1, which was the attack on a council staff member. Number 1, threatening behaviour. 2/3 of the way down.
I've got it, yes, so number 1, yep. Look, I'd have to check that.
Kerry Lee will answer that.
Good morning, councillors. Kerry Lee, Probert, Acting Chief Customer Officer. My understanding is that we did report that to the police.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It just wasn't reported in the report. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kerry. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies for coming back into the queue again. I just had another question on page 30, where there were a couple of incidents under the working with mobile plant where the response, I guess is it mitigation? The fix to it, one of them was aircon scheduled, and the other one was the truck has been replaced. And I'm just wondering, are these items that would have been part of a maintenance schedule that we haven't quite got to yet, or was those new things that we had to do in response to these two incidents?
From the maintenance perspective, yes, the scheduled maintenance would have been scheduled, but we hadn't got to it yet. The replacement of the truck was predominantly due to age.
Bryce
Sorry,
will,
so
Bryce will continue. No, he's not. Sorry. Sorry, Renee. Sorry,
So
Councillor Dingwell.
So just to clarify then, do you mean that we were already going to replace the truck and replace the aircon, but we hadn't got to it yet? Or like, was it already planned for this year, or was it planned for future years and it just didn't, and we'd had to pull it forward? I'm just trying to get a gauge of when those replacements were meant to happen.
We're back to Bryce now. We've clarified the question.
So I understand, yes, the maintenance was planned, and also the truck was also scheduled to be replaced as well. So this was, due to this incident, we were just able to pull those things forward and deal with them at the time. But both of them were scheduled to be done anyway.
Within this current financial year?
I understand so, yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Councillors, I have no further questions. Is there anybody that I've missed? Anybody online? No. So thank you very much, Alan. You may step down, and thank you, Wayne. I'm happy to move the recommendation that the committee, I'll wait till it comes up, that the committee resolved that the committee receive the memorandum titled Health, Safety and Wellbeing Report, January to March 2022, presented to the Finance and Audit Committee on the 25th of May 2022. I've moved it and have seconded. Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Thank you very much for a good report. This report's getting better and better, and I'm sure that the suggestions from councillors that for additional information will come forward. So we've never had any issues before about the information we've requested, and next time we get the report, if it's not quite right, we can tweak it. So I thank the staff on taking that on board. Councillor Naylor?
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow on, really appreciate the responsiveness from officers to actually refine and improve this report. It is really useful information. And just following on, the request to perhaps provide some high-level summary of the exit surveys, I think is really important in the context of our high vacancies and still quite high turnover. I think it's a really good indication of the health of an organisation to get a bit of insight into the reasons why people leave. And even if there is only a 50% uptake currently, that's actually quite a good sample in terms of surveys and other organisations in terms of the uptake of exit interviews. And I'm sure it will give us a bit of insight. Whilst it's not a complete picture, it does provide some helpful information. So I'll look forward to that being incorporated into the report. Thanks.
Councillor Dingwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also wanted to say a big thank you for this report. I think it's very, very useful. And in fact, every time we've seen it, it's been even more useful than the last one. And I really appreciate the information that's in there. A couple of things that kind of stick to my mind when I look at this is the importance of making sure that we are looking after our staff in terms of, I guess, allowing them to take that sick leave. And I know that we are doing it, and we can see the lines in the graphs, but just making sure, noting that, sick leave actually means sick leave was one of the things I had in my mind. But the other thing was the importance of keeping up with things like maintenance, replacement of vehicles, and health and safety in general, because you can see in this incident report how things can go quite badly wrong if we don't do those kind of things. So I just wanted to say thank you for the report and the work that you're doing behind the scenes.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And certainly I agree with other elected members that the standard of reporting has really been raised in this area. And I really want to thank, in particular, Alan, who I think has done a really excellent job with this reporting over the time that he's been in the position. So thank you, Alan. My comments really are around what we're doing to mitigate the risk of transmission of COVID-19 in the workplace, primarily for our staff, also, I suppose, for members of the public who might enter council buildings. And I'm grateful for the responses that I got to my email from last week that I wanted to talk about in public today. However, I will say this, and we know now that COVID-19 is primarily an airborne disease, and the main mitigations to the spread of COVID-19 are around providing clean air. So that's around making sure that there's adequate ventilation in the workplace and that any ventilation system is sufficiently filtered, that it filters out virus. And whilst I understand that some assessment was done of the air conditioning system in this building, I would suggest that we would be well placed to introduce some monitoring of how effective that ventilation is in terms of carbon dioxide monitors. Not that carbon dioxide itself is dangerous, well, it is eventually, I suppose, but that carbon dioxide monitoring is a proxy for the efficiency of ventilation in a building. And, I hear the comments that we are following public advice and the guidelines that government have issued, but I really would like to see us doing more than just the minimum to protect staff. I would like to see us provide a safe workplace in every aspect, and the emerging understanding of how to prevent COVID-19 transmission is around providing clean air. So I'd really encourage the CE and the staff that report on health and safety to expand that section on COVID-19 to include what mitigations are in place to prevent transmission from one staff member to another or to members of the public, and also what accommodations are in place for any staff who may be particularly vulnerable. So I would encourage that paragraph to be expanded. We know that this is an ongoing issue. It's not a one-off situation, and we, as the people responsible for health and safety of a very large staff, we need to be assured that we're doing not just exactly what we have to, but also what we could do to keep people safe at work. So I'd really encourage some more investigation into what could be done and some better reporting on what is being done. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett, you've come in.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to join the queue late. As others have said, a good report and increasingly of value to us as council and for the community's awareness. But I did want to comment as well on the aspects of COVID reporting in here from a health and safety point of view, particularly from a planning point of view, and demonstrating to the community that there has been a very high level of planning within this organization and a very high level of uptake through the organization of those plans. I think it's really important that we do make sure that the community is aware of that, because as the acting chief executive acknowledged, the community has actually been quite understanding of some losses of hours of access, of some temporary losses of services, etc. And I think it's very important that the community understands that those actions were taken only after we had done everything we could by way of mitigation and by way of planning to minimize service disruption and to ensure that we were looking after the health and safety of our staff, and that those effects and impacts on the community have happened in spite of very, very good planning and in spite of very, very good execution on the whole of our COVID-related plan. So I'm sure that if we were to disclose all the COVID planning that had been done within the organization, we could probably chop down a lot of trees. I'm not suggesting that we chop down all those trees and swamp the community with every detail, but I think that this report in future would be an excellent opportunity to, in a general manner, clarify the high standard of planning and activity that's undertaken by the organization, to give the community a point of reference around some of the impacts that have reached through into their day-to-day lives and their day-to-day interactions with council. So I'd hope that we could see that in future, but overall, not only a good report, but also a lot of good indications around health and safety culture in that report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, councillor. We'll now go to vote. We'll raise our hands, so all those in favour? Anyone against? That is carried unanimously. So we'll now go on to item number 8, the committee work schedule. I'm happy to move the report. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Are there any questions, any comments? Just wait for anybody online to see if there's anybody. No one online. So there's no one online, so we'll vote. All those in favour, raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Right, we'll now move on to item number 9, and we'll exclude the public, and then we'll break for morning tea. So I now move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting as item number 10, the Ticket Rocket liability in Palmerston North Speedway Limited claim against the council, and that's third party commercial, etc. And item number 11, request for additional financial support for the Regent Theatre Trust to cover Ticket Rocket claims, and that again is third party commercial, etc. So thank you, Councillor Naylor. So all those in favour, and we'll just wait for the people online. So that's, yes, they've all got their hands up, so that's carried unanimously. And we will now break for morning tea, and we'll be back in the chamber